everybody. It's Barb with Therapy Talks. Welcome to today's podcast. But before we get to that, I want to take a moment to tell you about an incredible gift from Switch Research. Click the link in the description of this episode to gain free lifetime access to the Self-Love Masterclass. In this, you will get an access to introspective journaling prompts that accompany the daily lessons and over 20 hours of guided journaling sessions by a licensed therapist. Plus, you get a digital version of the self-love journal to use in conjunction with the video series. So don't forget to claim your free gifts today. And on today's Therapy Talks podcast, we have on guest Teka Johnson, a licensed therapist from Virginia. We highlight narrative therapy, CBT, DBT, and advice for people who think they're ready for therapy. We talk about how to find the right therapist and how important that right fit is. We talk about Teka's 3 E's that anchor therapy: explore, empower, and equip. And we talk a lot about women of color and dissolving the stigma of mental health. You're going to like this episode. What do you like to work in? Who do you like to work with?
One, I like to work with people who are ready to do the work. That's one thing, because I have worked in a space where it was almost kind of like pulling teeth and having to kind of do more work than the clients. I really enjoy people who are really ready and willing to do the work, and it doesn't mean that it has to look perfect. But I do find myself attracting and aligning with a lot of clients who are women of color. Whether it be the college student who is managing the stress and all that comes with being a student while having internships and work and family stuff, or if it's the mom who is trying to figure out how do I care for myself while also being a mom, a wife, a sister, a daughter, an employee, all of the things. Or if it's like the older adult. I work with older women too who are in that transition space where they're like, my kids are out of the house, I'm nearing retirement, and I'm just trying to figure out who I am again. So I really enjoy working with women, clearly, but from all walks of life, and really of all experiences. I won't say all, because of course there's a gamut, but definitely majority of the experiences I'm noticing are women who happen to kind of be wearing a mask. They have to go through the world wearing a mask, wearing a cape, because there is a expectation of them to just kind of be all do all in their lives. And that expectation may be just from society, from family, maybe it's an internal pressure they took on. But in the therapeutic space that I hope to be warm and safe when I provide it for them, they can take it off and we can talk about how that experience has affected them and where they can feel more equipped with some tools to manage their life. One of the things I try to always say to my clients is that you're not broken, so therapy is not here to fix you. Therapy is here to give you the tools to just manage the ebbs and flows of life. Of course, we have all probably experiencing something significant in our life. So of course, trauma is another thing that I do work with. And trauma there's no big T, little t. Trauma is whatever that experience was that you were not emotionally, socially, physically prepared for. And so being able to help them manage how they respond to life based on maybe the trauma responses that they have, trying to unlearn the unhelpful maybe thoughts and beliefs they have, to try new behaviors to see if that can help them better manage life. That is what I really enjoy doing. So, and it comes with various modalities, but that's really what I enjoy doing.
Oh, I love that. And we can get into the modalities maybe next. But before this, I want to go back to something that you said. I like working with people who are ready to do the work. I mean, that is like every therapist's dream. I will say that. And I've been there too, of like, you're working harder than the client, and that can be really difficult. So for our watchers or our listeners, and they're thinking, okay, maybe I'm interested in therapy, but I don't know if I'm ready to do the work. Like, what are some signs that someone is ready to show up and do the work?
Yes. Two of the things that I like to kind of highlight in consultations with clients to see if they're ready and if we'll be a good fit is I ask, how are the things that you're experiencing now, the problems, the issues, concerns, how are they affecting your relationship with others? And so if they find that there are challenges or problems, whether it's, oh, I'm having difficulty keeping my friends, or I find myself more irritable and snapping with the people in my life, or maybe I'm more withdrawn and isolated and I don't want to talk to anyone. I'm kind of scared to go out and integrate with others. So we talk about how it's affecting their relationship with others and then how it's affecting their relationship with themselves. So, how are you treating yourself? Do you find yourself binging food or Netflix and kind of not taking care of other tasks that are healthy for you? Do you find yourself thinking negative thoughts and kind of being your own worst critic? Do you find yourself having difficulty, getting dressed and getting up in the morning, kind of eating or showering, or even getting outside and getting some sun? Just how are we taking care of ourselves? What does that relationship with ourselves look like? If you notice that there are issues or problems or concerns in both of those areas, you may be ready to talk to a therapist. And of course, there are other, avenues of service providers or helpers that you could go down. There's coaches, there's doctors, there's a lot. There's a lot in the wellness space, but I would say that if you're ready to talk to a therapist, that is definitely some of those signs. And then, of course, day-to-day functioning. So for some people, it's not necessarily always just social or physical for them. Maybe it's like day-to-day, their functioning is impacted. So they're not able to kind of complete tasks, or they feel that they're not able to manage their regular interests or their regular tasks or chores or duties throughout the day, responsibilities. They find that functioning is impacted and feels a little harder to complete things than usual. It takes a little bit more energy to complete things than usual. That sometimes is also a sign that you may be ready to talk to a therapist.
And let's say that someone listening really resonates with that. I know that in terms of my life, I have in the types of clients that I work with, they would probably say yes to like all of the above. It is hard. I am feeling overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. So then what does working with you look like? Like what strategies, what approaches do you implement if someone after that consultation, you're like, yeah, this person feels safe. You've created a great job at creating a safe space and kind of giving hope, like of someone who's just even struggling in the little mundane tasks. That's often what we see. And like you said, relationships are a great indicator of how we're doing internally. And they're just not going that well, or you're more snippy or withdrawn. And they're like, yes, I think I do want to do some of this work. Where do you start? What does that process look like with you?
So for a lot of therapists, I won't say all, but for a lot of us, we do like to start by just getting to know the client. So I call this I have 3 E's that I kind of try to let be the anchor of my practice. And so the first is explore. So that's where we're doing the assessments. That's where I'm asking about, your social life, your work life, your family life. You can tell me the history of things you've experienced. Just getting a full picture of who you are. It won't be complete, but getting a fuller, I would say, picture of kind of who you are, what you've experienced, and kind of how you got to where you are today. Also exploring how long you've been experiencing some of the problems or issues that you've shared with me, because the length of time can sometimes also be an indicator of what it is that you're experiencing. When I first meet with a client, I always tell them I'm not going to diagnose you in one session. That's not fair to you because I cannot get to know who you are, the history of all of your symptoms and experiences in an hour, hour and a half. That is unfair. But I do give like a clinical impression. Like it sounds like this may be what you're experiencing, or it sounds like we're going down this path and that may be helpful for us when we want to get to our goals, which is kind of the next step. So the second E is equip. And so once we establish some goals and we collaborate and say, okay, what is it that you want to experience and how will we know when we've gotten there? That is where we start to build those goals. And so I say, okay, great. Now we can start to get the tools. We'll equip ourselves with the healthy skills. We'll equip ourselves with the tools to manage life, unlearn some of the things that weren't helping us. Really look at the truth of the things that maybe we were conditioned to believe we could utilize, and give ourselves some grace and gentleness to kind of unlearn and decrease how much we're using those, and then take on some of the healthier things. And that aligns with whoever the client is too. So Some clients, they want to utilize spirituality. And I said, okay, let's look at the tools that are aligned with that for you, or culture or tradition, just whatever their preferences are. I try to remind them that this is collaborative, this is your journey. I'm just kind of like a guide on it, but you get to take the steps. And so once they feel equipped, we get to the last E, which is empower. And so my favorite part of therapy, although it is not always the most exciting when I talk about it with clients, is when we do get to that point where they're working more independently and we're seeing each other less. Some clients are like, no, I'm used to seeing you every week, every other week. And I'm like, well, you're doing so well. I feel like you're empowered to utilize all that we've been learning, all that you've been talking about with me independently. When you come back, we'll get to that maintenance stage where you'll share. How is it going? What have you noticed has been helpful? Are some things not helpful? Do we need to maybe collaborate with another service provider? And so that empower stage is my favorite because I can see the change with the client and they can see it too. I really encourage them to share, like, where did we start and where are we now? Do you see the change? How are you feeling about the change that you've made? That is one of my most favorite parts of seeing it, because it kind of feels like a full circle moment that my calling, the reason that I'm here, the gift that I'm leaving on this earth is worth it. That it is actually being fulfilled. And so that is my approach with clients. And to answer kind of, I guess, the question too about modalities, is that in the equip stage, that's where those come into play. I mean, really the entire process, but that is kind of like the meat and potatoes of where those come into play.
Yeah. What are your favorite modalities to use?
Ooh, so one is from my own experiences. I like to say that I am a storyteller. I love to journal. I love to write. I really enjoy creative outlets. And so one of those is through narrative therapy. So to look at the experiences of the client and what belief systems or thought systems have really originated from the story that you're telling yourself, whether it's different experiences from childhood, adolescence, adulthood. Where can we kind of find the pattern as well of beliefs or experiences and behaviors? And so that narrative therapy technique is really helpful, because then it also gives the client power back to kind of take control over the story that they're telling themselves, and even sometimes rewrite the stories that are from the past. Another one that I enjoy, I think it's kind of like, well, I won't say therapy one-on-one, but it's a lot of a therapist's favorites, is CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, where we look at how your feelings, your thoughts, and your behaviors are connected. And where can we kind of catch the cycle of the unhelpful thoughts or the unhelpful behaviors to reframe or restructure them so that they are more helpful. That's another one of my favorites. And let's see, I do like to teach some DBT skills. I don't necessarily do DBT therapy. That includes like the 1 hour sessions of, therapy, the skills, and the group therapy. I don't do that, but I do find that the skills are very helpful, especially for those that may experience intense levels of like anxiety or depression, because it gives them some ways to regulate their emotions, to help with their interpersonal relationships, to manage things that they deem distressing. And then that kind of leads me into one of my other favorites, which is mindfulness, specifically like mindfulness-based stress reduction. So again, like I said, a lot of the clients I work with, they're high functioning women who are experiencing depression and anxiety. And so there are times where they're just kind of thinking about what has to get done. I'm thinking about the future. I'm thinking about my to-do list, and they're not really in the present moment. And so they notice that it's affecting them because they have the somatic symptoms, whether it is the stomach issues, whether it's the tense muscles, whether it's the headaches. And they're like, I don't know why this is happening. And I'm like, it's probably a stress response. Your body is telling you something needs to change. And so with mindfulness, we're able to kind of teach them how to come back to the present moment, to not have any judgment, any anticipation about what this means. Just notice and allow yourself to breathe in the now. That's another favorite of mine. So yeah, I think those are kind of my top 4, I would say.
That is awesome. And we've had lots of narrative therapy and CBT and mindfulness on here. But for DBT, For our listeners who maybe aren't as familiar with that, you've done a great job of describing kind of each modality as well, by the way. What would be that approach? How is that different from CBT? And what would be like an example skill that you teach?
So the typical, and I won't say typical, but clients that would benefit from DBT are those that may have grown up with environments that weren't always validating for their experiences and their emotions. And it affected the way that they manage and regulate their emotions and the way that they manage their relationships. And that means that sometimes things get to the level where they are almost like a crisis. And crisis meaning that things are now out of your control, they're at risk of danger. And so the DBT modality has 4 components that help you to manage those emotions and relationships better. And so the first is mindfulness. So it teaches you how to kind of just observe what's happening internally and externally without judgment. How to describe things to yourself that you're also experiencing, give you the language and the verbiage to do that as well, so that you can move into the next, which is distress tolerance. And distress basically means that the emotions that you're experiencing, you feel that you cannot control, you cannot handle it. You're like, it's too much, it's too big, it's too heavy, it feels too painful. And so distress tolerance teaches you, hey, you don't have to avoid it, you don't have to numb out anymore. You don't need to, check in with people to make sure, hey, is what I'm feeling actually what I'm feeling? Is what I'm experiencing actually what I'm experiencing? It kind of gives you some autonomy over, hey, what you're experiencing, the feelings that you're feeling, they're valid. They are very valid, but they don't have to consume you. So let's learn some skills to help you manage that. And then next would be emotional regulation. And so that is how to basically bring your emotions to a level where we're not making them disappear, poof, be gone, but more so if like you can manage and regulate them so they're not at a level where it is causing you to say, do, or act in any way that is harmful to you or others. And then the last is interpersonal effectiveness. And so that's more so catered to, okay, how are you showing up in your relationships? Are you having difficulty communicating what you need? Do you have difficulty setting boundaries? How assertive are you? Do you find it difficult to stay in difficult or hard or maybe challenging conversations? So it gives you the skills to handle that as well. In DBT, you do have kind of like 3 different session components. So those are the skills, but you have 3 different kind of session components. So if you do decide to seek out a DBT therapist who's trained and certified, they will let you know that it is going to be a lot of work because you'll meet with them for an hour for therapy. Then you'll have another hour of skills training where they'll give you homework that you do have to complete before you move forward to the next step. And then that also includes group therapy. So DBT, I would say, is one that is really helpful, proven to be very effective. It's one of those most common evidence-based treatment modalities, but it does seem to be, in my experience and just from leading some of the groups, it is intense. But I think it's helpful. Yeah, I think it's helpful.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. You did a great job of describing all of that. Thank you. And then you said one of an area right now that you're really passionate about and the people that you're really passionate about supporting and walking with, women of color and women who feel like they're putting on the mask. They have to be all and do all and wear that cape. I think so many women resonate there. Tell me about those women, how you work with them, what you love and resonate working with them.
Yes. Those women, I would say one thing that I feel aligns with them is because I too am in managing, my own depression and anxiety and the way that that shows up in my life. And so I think my own personal experiences, one, help me to resonate with them and really align with them because I can say, hey, I understand. Or even if I don't understand your exact experience, I can empathize with it. And so when I see that, and the way that that presents, a lot of times the first couple of sessions I have to remind them, you're not obligated to do anything here, you're just encouraged to be. And that is something that I don't think a lot of women hear, that you don't have to really do anything, because in society we're almost kind of encouraged, it's glamorized to kind of be on the grind, to always be hustling, to get the degrees, to have the amazing jobs, to get the six figures, to have the extensive LinkedIn profile. Like you're encouraged to kind of just do all of the things, and no one really gives you permission to be. And so I find that is a space where I'm passionate because I don't think I also grew up with permission to just kind of be. I was encouraged to get all of the A's, to be in all the clubs, to be in all the leadership roles. And after a while, you kind of say, well, without all of that, who am I? And what do I do? And so our process, it gives us a chance to really tell them, well, hey, let's kind of peel back some of those layers and figure out who are you beneath all of the titles, all of the roles, all of the hats that you wear. All of them are very relevant. They're valid. They serve a purpose, right? You don't have to stop, doing those things in order to have a successful therapeutic journey because, of course, they serve a purpose. However, it's okay to say, I want to integrate some ways that I care for myself and just allow myself to be. I'm not going to connect my identity to my productivity. I'm not going to connect my worth to how much I perform or earn. I'm going to let myself know that I am worthy just because I am. I'm breathing. I woke up. I'm present. I'm on earth. And that's sometimes a hard concept to grasp because we are conditioned that, your worth is connected to what you can do. What can you do for me? And so when we manage, or I help them manage and learn some tools to manage the high functioning depression and anxiety, a lot of it is CBT work and also some trauma work because a lot of women who do present that way, whether they are aware or not, have experienced a level of trauma that has taught them these coping skills, these coping mechanisms of how to get through life. And so that is also a part that I feel is really important because we kind of put band-aids or sweep under the rug or may just kind of put on the shelf the significant life experiences that may have shaped kind of how we're showing up today. And it's not easy and it's not forced at all. So I tell them also, you can do it at your own pace. But I do think it's important to say, let's look at those experiences. Because the way that you think or the way that you respond to different things, that's not just occurring in a vacuum. There may be a thread that we can connect to a previous experience or a thread that we can connect to maybe a person from your past who may have told you that that's the way that you're supposed to think or may have projected onto you that's the way you're supposed to behave. So I think it's really important to do that work as well. So yeah, I'm passionate about it because I connect with it from my own experience.
Yeah. And I think that's what makes the best therapists good is that they know what it's like to be on the other seat and to walk through that. And your story can be someone else's survival guide, really. It doesn't mean that you have to have it all figured out. I remember when I first got into this field, I thought, oh, I'll be a therapist when I'm like 50 and I have all my stuff figured out. And it's really the scars. It's really walking through a lot of the pain that makes you empathetic and be able to be present with people and hold space. And I love that. I love that you're using some of the hardest parts or the pain. And it doesn't mean it has to be all wrapped up and finalized and everything in a nice bow. It's like, no, I've done a lot of the work. I'll continue to do work too. But where I'm at currently, I'm in a position of doing that work, putting it in, being stable enough to actually walk with other people. And in fact, that allows that empathy and that power and that presence.
Exactly, exactly. Yes, I am a therapist who has her own therapist. I say I'm like, if you're a therapist, they encouraged that too for us when I was in grad school. Um, Although they did not teach us kind of how to be in private practice, especially the business side, they did encourage us like, hey, as we're doing this work, and even in some of the classes that you'll be in, it's okay to go see a therapist. We even encourage it, almost implore you all to do this because some of the topics that we'll talk about, some of the populations that you'll work with, then you start tapping on some of those things that you may have thought were hidden or just taken care of. And so you're right. Yeah. Kind of dealing with and stabilizing ourselves is so important. I have a affirmation on my mirror that says, in order to be a healer, I must do my own healing. And so it just kind of encourages me like, okay, even though the work, even my own work can sometimes feel heavy, daunting, tiresome. Sometimes I'm looking at my therapist like, why are we talking about this? I don't want to do this today. Um, I have to kind of just constantly remind myself it's worth it and it's not just for you.
Yeah, in order to be present with other people, you have to be present with yourself.
Exactly.
And my mentor, he was our first guest on Therapy Talks, and he is a narrative therapy specialist. So we love narrative therapy here. But he always told me, he's like, you know what, behind every good therapist is a good therapist.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Exactly.
so true.
Almost like
Because
a
it could be
team.
lonely or isolating work or like you said, like you could have done work and then it's like somebody hits a pain point and you're like, wow, I've got to debrief this here. And you have that safe place to go to. And honestly, when I go through difficulties, I think it almost makes me a better therapist then
Mm-hmm.
because I'm reminded of, oh, wow, yeah, anxiety. I forgot how intense this feels, how overwhelming, how empathetic then you can become. And yeah.
Yeah, it does. It really does. It really does. And I think clients can sense that sometimes too. You don't have to necessarily have uh, experience with everything that a client is sharing with you because we're individuals, we have different backgrounds. But when you're able to say, like, I understand, or me too, or even those moments when you can healthily self disclose to say, you know what, this is kind of what I experienced and how I managed it. Let's talk about whether or not this could be right for you. I think that that is something that resonates with them. It builds that really close therapeutic connection and relationship. It builds that trust, really, to say, like, wow, my therapist is not a robot. She's not just the person behind, or they are not just the person behind the screen, or the person sitting across from me while I'm, chilling on their seat or their couch. Like, they're a real person, a human being that experiences the things I've experienced. They just happen to have the education and training to help me manage it.
Yeah. So true. And you said some words that are really familiar to most people, anxiety, depression. But when you said chronic or high functioning depression, high functioning anxiety, what does that mean?
Yes. So high functioning depression or anxiety, it is a level of the disorders where you're able to kind of show up like you would normally. And I put that in quotation marks because what's normal, but kind of what is expected or what is typical of you. But it takes a lot of energy. Um, One of the examples I give some women is that, you're able to go to work and complete the task. You're able to show up for the birthday parties and the friendship dinners. But then when you get home, you find yourself to be exhausted to the point of you're not able to do anything else for yourself. The laundry is still piling up, the dishes are in the sink. You're ordering out takeout again. You're not able to grocery shop. You're finding yourself taking days on end of not kind of texting or answering calls anymore. You're able to do all of the things, and then there's almost kind of like a gradual decline. Or even a lot of it, when we find that they're experiencing high functioning depression and anxiety, is there are a gamut of somatic symptoms. And somatic means, how is it showing up in your body, the physical sensations. And so that's the unexplicable headaches. Why do I have a headache every day? Or the GI or the gastrointestinal issues. So my stomach is upsetting me, and I don't have any allergies, any food allergies. I don't have any known conditions, but I just can't seem to hold down any food or have an appetite, or I can't seem to stop eating a specific food. Um, Even the muscle tension. I remember one time I went to the dentist and they asked me, they were like, "Are you experiencing any stress or anxiety?" And I was like, "No, I don't think so." Like, I mean, work is hard, but it's therapy. I'm here, I'm doing it, but I don't think I'm stressed or anxious. And they said, well, we're checking your jaw, we're checking your teeth, and you're literally grinding your teeth away. And your jaw muscles are like basically inflamed. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, are you experiencing headaches? And I'm like, yeah, but I just popped Excedrin. And they're like, okay, well, this could be something else. They're like, because other than, stress, anxiety, or maybe even a specific thing that you're anticipating, they're like, this is not something that we can explain. There are no other, conditions that you have to our knowledge and to your health history that could explain this. And I share that with some clients because they're like, I wake up with headaches almost every morning. And I'm like, that may be explaining something, you know? Let's kind of tap into what could you be holding? What could you be subconsciously stressing or anxious or overwhelmed or worried about? And so the high functioning, it's kind of like, to kind of put a wrap it up, it's a condition that wears a mask. There are conditions that wear masks, and the masks present really well to the world, but beneath it, things feel or seem to be crumbling or falling apart. But people think we're handling it well.
And I think a lot of people can resonate with that in one way or another, or from one time or another from time to time. So, given what you have kind of shared about the signs of someone ready to do the work, like let's say one of our listeners is like, yes, I resonate there. And I really resonate with that mask, or that I'm putting it together. I'm a student in college and I'm putting it together in my classes and high achieving, but then I'm empty by the end of the day and I'm so overwhelmed. Or, I'm a mom and I give it all and I show up at the birthday parties, but then at home, I can't even function that well, or I'm getting behind. I'm feeling like I'm falling behind. I'm overwhelmed. What does someone do? What's the next step?
The first thing I would do is to first give yourself a pat on the back, a hug, maybe a positive word of affirmation, because it's really brave and courageous to admit that things are not going the way that you thought they would, or that you're experiencing some changes or difficulties to the point where it's affecting your day to day life and how you show up in the world and in your relationship. So, one, I want to say it's brave, it's courageous, and it's great that you are considering reaching out. Second, I would say, is to check in with your network, meaning like your friends and family. Also, ask if you have coverage, your insurance company, or get online and search for some directories to reach out to a therapist. It is okay to prefer to schedule a consultation with a therapist first. A lot of us offer those for free. And that is like a 15, 20-minute opportunity for you just to share what are you experiencing and to ask the therapist questions. Whenever I have my consultations with clients, I tell them, I said, this is a time for us to figure out if we're a good fit for each other. Meaning that the therapist also can say sometimes, hey, this may be outside of my scope, or I may feel like we're not a good fit. And they'll give you a referral for someone else. But it is also a time for the client to ask, like, hey, what are your approaches? How long have you been practicing? Um, what can I expect throughout the process with you? And so it's really important to ask those questions, because every therapist can be a good therapist, but that doesn't mean that they're the therapist for you. And so, yeah. And so once you do that and you start that process, I would say to not anticipate it to be like therapy on TV. You're not you're not gonna be laying on a couch and the therapist is not gonna just be and just taking notes. It sometimes will feel like a conversation. Trust me, the therapist is gathering what they need, the information they need to help. But it sometimes will feel like a conversation, or it'll feel sometimes even like school. Therapists are also educators, and so they'll be providing psychoeducation about maybe some of the symptoms you're experiencing to help give you an understanding or validate what you're experiencing. They're going to be giving you encouragement, but therapists are not going to tell you what to do. They're not advice givers. Um, they'll help to kind of guide you and ask the right questions so that you can come up with your answer, or you can come up with your decision, because you are an empowered person. You may not know it yet, but you're definitely an empowered person where you can answer your own questions and make your own decisions. And so that's another thing that therapists do. And the length of time that you're with a therapist, it varies. They get to decide that with you, but each session is definitely catered around you, and so it's a time for you to just be, like I mentioned earlier. It's a time to just kind of show up and have, even if it's just 60 minutes of some self-care once a week.
Mhm.
It's worth it.
Yeah. And it is really those pillars. I love your 3 E's. I often say educate, empower, equip. And so I love that. Explore, like exploring your different relationships, your hobbies, your work, your equipping with different strategies, and those modalities can be in there too. And then empowering. It's like our goal is to make your own therapist, and to see us less,
Exactly.
which is a
Exactly.
weird thing because
Yeah.
you gain such a great relationship and you're used to seeing them, whether it's weekly or biweekly or, pretty consistently. And then it's actually a good thing when you don't, but it still is sad. And as therapists, we do think about you between sessions. We do miss you and we cheer you on and we're so proud of you. And it's a weird dynamic. It's beautiful, but it's an interesting thing that as close as you get, kind of the goal is to get farther apart in the times you see each other.
Yep. It's kind of like we're far apart, then we come together, and then the goal is to go far apart again. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
And when you're working with women of color, what are you seeing in this demographic with these women that maybe is just different than the average population, or what's unique there?
Mm, that's a good question. So one of the things I attended a training probably last year. Yeah, I'm gonna say it was last year. I attended a training about the cultural kind of like implications that come up with women of color. There may be stigmas when it comes to mental health. There may be stigmas when it comes to what it means to present a certain way. Some cultures may deem it like a possession or something that is like demonic, or
Demonic. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
may even see it as someone who's like an outcast or someone who is an other. And so, whenever women of color sometimes come in, there's a lot of that one, first validating like that is your cultural experience, but normalizing that it does not mean that anything is wrong or broken in you. And so I do find with women of color, we do have to really integrate how are your cultural experiences affecting the way that you are seeing yourself, the way that you see therapy, the way that you see even medication. And so that work, I feel like takes a little bit more work to help them navigate through that, because there are not as many, it's growing. I will say the awareness is growing, but there are not as many people who are aware and advocate for mental wellness and well-being in some of those spaces of color. And so it's important to really hold space for that and to normalize, like, I get it, that happens, and validate their experiences, but also let them know that that does not have to be the entirety of their experience. They're able to kind of choose what they believe and how they show up, while also honoring their culture and traditions.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. And what are you noticing are some of the biggest stigmas still, whether it's with women of color or just in general right now? It's too for women who maybe are the ones, especially that they feel like there's a mask or that cape on, or culturally, it's like, I don't know if we do this, or I don't know what so and so is going to think about me or what I think about this, and mental health and therapy. Around all of that stigma, what are you seeing? Are you seeing it? Obviously, it's still there to some extent, but are you seeing it lessening, or what are you seeing?
I will say I am seeing it lessening as far as the stigma. I think social media, oh my goodness, it's like a double-edged sword, honestly,
Right.
because
Yeah.
it has skyrocketed the awareness of different mental health diagnoses or the resources that are out there. There are therapists now that are on TikTok. One of my mentors, she is booming as far as a therapist on TikTok and YouTube, and so you're bringing all of this resources and this awareness to the forefront, and so people, the stigma is definitely lessening because people are now able to access it quickly and say, oh, like this person looks like me, or this person's experiencing something that I'm experiencing. So I definitely see the stigma lessening, but I also feel that excuse me, there may be a sometimes we misdiagnose and misinterpret some of the experiences because of social media. Like people may be self-diagnosing, or they may get their advice and their resources from people who are not licensed mental health providers, and that kind of scares me sometimes.
Right.
um,
Yeah.
because I'm like, hey, make sure that anything that you see on social media, you're verifying or confirming with a licensed mental health provider.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I would say too that the stigma, especially for people of color, just in general, the stigma of not trusting health service providers in general, not just therapists, but physicians, psychiatrists, dentists, all of the above. That stigma is lessening as well because there's a history of not being able to trust that space. And so now that we're kind of saying, hey, the same reason that we would go to a doctor for a broken bone or for high cholesterol or diabetes, you can also see a therapist and trust them too. So it's kind of just easing them along that space and that path of trusting health service providers. But I do see that lessening as well, especially with the increase in providers of color. So now they're able to say, "Oh, okay, I feel like I can now trust them because they look like me," and that's just the reality of the situation. It's a history that we're trying to reconcile, but at the same time, we have to make sure they have the resources to get what they can now while they can. And if that means having a provider that looks like them so that they can get the help that they deserve, then let it be. Let it be.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. That connection can be so safe. And I think in any therapeutic relationship, to be able to connect on something, whether it's you have a certain cultural background, shared experience, you look similar, anything. But if you can find that, wow, does someone feel safe? And there's that connection. And like you said, with the consultations, the right fit with your therapist is the most important thing. There's a lot of good therapists out there. There's a lot of good modalities and strategies and tools, but really it's that connection with the person that is the most important thing and great indicator of success in therapy.
I agree. I like that you said that, yeah, because it's not just about, race or ethnicity. It could be about experiences, it could be traditions, it could just be anything that connects you. When you find that connection with someone, it does create that safe space. Because I have some people ask me as well, like, should I get a male or a female therapist? And I say, well, there's no rule that says if you're a male, you have to have a male therapist, or if you're a female, you have to have a female therapist. It's who you connect with.
And you really like to work with women, you said. Do you work with men at all?
I do. I have a couple of male clients too. I do. And I think that sometimes with my social media or my website, they may think like, oh, she only works with women. But the ones that I have connected with, I'm like, I work with men as well. So I'm trying now to make sure that I'm advertising and marketing and holding space for men as well, because that is an entirely other population where I feel like they are having to wear a mask and kind of show up in a way that doesn't allow them to be vulnerable. And so I do see men as well. Yeah, I feel like they deserve it too. And so I can
That's
see guys
awesome.
too. I love my
Yeah,
girls,
yeah. Oh,
girl, but I
that's
can see
awesome.
guys too.
And do you do most of your work in person, online? Like, where can our listeners find you if they want to learn more or even look you up and contact you?
Sure. So, believe it or not, when I launched my practice, it was the middle of the pandemic. So that was May 2020. So my practice has been 100% virtual. And I really enjoy that. I do enjoy working with people in person because I've done that in the past. But I find that the virtual experience has given a different level of accessibility. You don't have to worry about babysitters. You don't have to worry about rushing through rush hour traffic or, putting gas in the car. It's like wherever you are, we can meet. And so listeners can find a lot about my practice and me at soulempoweredwellness.com. I'm not accepting any new clients right now in Virginia, but I do offer other offerings, whether it's a newsletter if they want to get some more resources on mental health. I send out a referral list for those that do reach out, and I am able to say, hey, I'm not accepting clients, but here's some really other awesome therapists that are. And then also just some like kind of wellness tools that I also share on my website. So soulempoweredwellness.com, and across social media, it's also Soul Empowered Wellness, so Instagram and Facebook.
Cool. Okay, that's awesome. I love that and those resources and yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you for doing that. I know that's a lot of time and effort, but you can just sense your passion in the education and again, kind of bringing all of your experiences of your vast, workplace experiences into your therapeutic experience right now, whether it's online or newsletter or with people or this on a podcast and social media. It's great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Well, as we wrap up, is there any closing thoughts or anything else you'd want to share with the listeners from today of what we've talked about, or, kind of an encouragement or a reflection of anything that's really come up if they're listening and something's come up for them or resonated?
I'll leave them with this. One of the things is kind of like the statement that drives my practice and why I do what I do, but it is that you're worthy of the wellness that you seek. And so that means that there is nothing that you have to do to want to be well. There's nothing you have to earn or prove that you want to be well. You just have to show up. Just show up.
Oh, you're worthy. I love that. Because I think as humans, we all resonate with that. We, confuse our performance equals worth. I share about that a lot. Like my background's in athletics, elite athletics. And so that's a really hard thing to separate. Like your performance and your worth are very different. And there's even times in my current life, I've done a ton of the work. I am a therapist. And it comes up. So if those things resonate today as you're listening, you're not alone. And I hope today in any of these things that we've talked about, that you've got some of the skills, the tools, or just encouragement that you're not alone, that you're not broken, that you are worthy just as you are. And again, I love those 3 E's: lure, equip, and empower. I love those. So that those are great guiding principles, great anchoring points. And yeah, thank you. Thank you, Teka, for coming on. And we just really value your time and your insight and your story. So thank
Thank
you.
you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.